Hey guys, this will be video 7 for the how to design build a custom Explorer replica and paint it sapphire blue or paint it gloss black and then put shark fin mother of pearl inlays in a maple fretboard. Very happy with this. It's turned out really beautiful. So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that in a minute, but in the meantime I'm going to talk about and in reference to this I'm going to talk about how to actually pull this off and the bits to use and stuff like that. So I'm going to get fairly technical in a little while and then also discuss the approach you would take if you're going to do binding. So we'll spend a lot of time with that in a little while, but I want to get it out of the way for right now and talk about this kick-ass sapphire blue shocking guitar. Now it looks really rough right now because a lot of orange peel because this is all the base coats where I was just bringing it to life. But I'm extremely happy with it. It's so beautiful, such a cool color. And the way I did it, it's been a bit of a nightmare doing it. I knew it was going to be extremely difficult to pull off, but nonetheless, what I would do, I would spray several coats and then let it dry for like 30 minutes, walk outside and in the sunlight and assess it. And then if there was any rain in the forecast at all, I didn't dare do any spraying, even though my shop is, my spray booth is indoors and I have an explosion proof fan and all that jazz. But when I run that fan, I have to open up the window behind it, obviously, so that it'll, blow the chemical out. And if you open up that large window, then whatever the humidity is outside, it's going to creep into your shop. So this has been a very slow go process to get the build coats on this one where I want it. It's got a lot of dust on it because it's just been hanging over out of the booth because I'm building a flying V as well, and so this has been hanging outside of the booth just in the shop over there, and it's got a hell of a lot of dust on it. I did a little bit of 400 grit sanding right here, but in other words, this is obviously not the finished guitar. It's got a long way to go, and unfortunately I ran out of lacquer. And I had to order some more lacquer, was waiting on that. It just came in. So from here on out, I'll just be building clear coat coats. So very happy with it. And again, it's going to be crazy cool to see this whole maple shark fin. So the reason I've got this on the table, I'm going to go ahead and start talking about finish work because as I mentioned right here, all of this is, you can see, I'm going to intentionally make certain that you can see the orange peel so that as you're building your guitar, you don't panic and think, oh God, it's not shiny, it's not perfect, it's not beautiful. And I can assure you, all of the beautiful guitars, they do not come alive until they have dried, especially if you're painting Nitro. They don't come alive until like a month later after you've done all the build coats and you've let it dry for a minimum of about a week or two. And then you're coming in with just a little bit of 220 sanding on the very front end, but very quickly you're transitioning over to 400 grit aluminum oxide, and then I don't have it in my hand. I'm looking at it's over on the table. Then you transition up to 600. Well, I can just grab it. Then you're going to transition up to 600 grit, wet or dry, and you can see where I've been doing a little bit of wet sanding on that black guitar. But I get this from Napa Auto Parts. They're really good about keeping automotive anything that a pro painter needs to do extremely high quality paint work. If you have a Napa Auto Parts, they're incredible about stocking this stuff all the way up to like a 3,000 grit wet or dry. And there you have it. So anyway, but this is kind of what you're going to expect. And every now and then, like if you get a little bit heavy with the gun, if it doesn't run on you, it'll show you just how shiny it's going to be, even though it's got a lot of orange peel there. So there's going to be let me make sure I'm not using the black sandpaper. When you are working with different colored guitars, make certain that you identify which sandpaper you're using, because you don't want to be sanding on the black guitar and then come over and sand on the blue. You'll start contaminating the finishes. But basically, you're just going to be coming in and knocking off the orange peel a little bit and then clear coating from there. So just plan on doing an enormous amount of hand work to get it finished. Uh, it's very it's a daunting task. I'll shoot really straight with you. Painting is the most difficult of the entire process, and I think it takes twice as much effort to get them painted as it does to just build the guitar. Now, on the very front end, and Art, this is directed at you. You had mentioned, what about the idea of doing the blue, the sapphire blue over headstock overlay? I'm gonna go straight to the finish line. I love this. Um, I had it black initially. Not initially. Initially, it was all white, but then I did paint it black once, and it looked kind of blasé, I guess is the word. It looked a little bit bland. But then also, and I'll shoot straight with you. A lot of this was much easier to do all the spray work in just one color, but I think it screams custom if we just leave it sapphire blue. And I think that would be really, really cool because keep in mind, once this is clear coated and then buffed, it'll have the real beautiful warm glow to it, or either it could be buffed to an extremely high gloss finish. Um, I won't be doing that. I'll be buffing it to a really nice gloss, but I'm not going to spend like 40 hours on it, doing 3,000 grit sanding and stuff like that to bring it to that finish. I don't know if I clarified that in some of the communications, but it'll be beautiful and I have a real beautiful glow to it. But I build players guitars. So, but if you wanted to bring it to that incredible finish, then you could wax and buff and wet sand and wax and buff and wet sand with like 3,000 grit. But I'll be taking this one up to like 1,500 grit, and you'll see your reflection in it. It'll be really pretty. But anyway, all right, I spent a little bit too much time talking about that. But the reason I did want to show this is to just show you the reality of they look fairly rough through the entire build process, and it's real easy to kind of get spooked and think that, oh my God, is this thing ever going to come together? And even like this one right here. Now this one has clear coat base buildup on it, but you can also see where I did some initial sanding and then some touch up with the black and stuff like that. But this one does have more clear coat on it, and then I've already started the initial sanding on this one. I think right now I'm up to 600 grit on this top, but it has not been wet sanded yet. Uh, no, I'll take that back. The whole guitar has not been wet sanded yet, but I did wet sand the top just a little while ago to prepare for the video because it looked a little bit rough, and I just wanted you to kind of see where this one's about to go is what you see right here. So very quickly it'll go from like that orange peel look for it to start leveling out a little bit is where I'm going with that. Okay, so beautiful guitar, very cool, and you can just see how it still has a lot of the orange peel, and every now and then it'll show a real beautiful gloss, but for the most part they look really rough all the way through the whole build process, and they really don't come together until just the very end of the job when you're almost finished with them. So it takes a lot of effort. Okay, what do I want to talk about? Let me pause briefly and decide what I want to get off the table. I'm pretty certain I want to get this off the table. Let me pause briefly and reorganize the table because I want to spend a lot of time talking about this fretboard. Okay, let's dive back in. I changed my mind a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of sanding on camera with respect to this guitar, since it does have clear coat on it, and kind of show you how quickly they will come alive. So let's just do that. I'm going to, obviously this does have clear coat on it. I'm going to start with a 400 and be real gentle. Once you get to this point, stay away from the 220. 220 will really, uh, it really make a mess of it. So let me see if that's in the camera. And I don't want to sand on the Sapphire Blue guitar because it doesn't have any clear coat yet. And is your do with the paper? This is all blue right here. Like I said, if you've been sanding on the blue guitar, make certain that you don't pick up that. See, this has a little bit of black on it. And then there's the 220. Let's get away from that. But then you'll even have like 400 that is like really fresh, and you'll need to make the decision. Well, do I want to use the 400 that's really fresh, or do I want to use a 400 that's kind of worn out? And this is a little bit worn right there, so I'm going to be a little bit aggressive and kind of go into it kind of fast. And a lot of painters will say don't do too much circular. But when you're building it, because I'm probably still going to shoot one more coat of clear, a real fine mist. Yeah, oh, I forgot. I did touch that up with some black. So never mind. So this is going to get this is probably going to get 2 more coats of clear. But at least this will show you how quickly they can come alive. And also at this point, I would say keep your paper towel, and I'll do the best I can to. I've learned that working with black or any dark colors, if you do too much of that circular sanding, it'll create a lot of swirl. So once you start getting it level, just go straight. Just go straight across it like that. And I can already see it flattening out right there fairly well. So probably once this gets 1 or 2 coats of real thin clear, this baby will level out really nice. And you want to really stay away from the corners right here, because you'll want to come back with a like a quad alt or a double alt. Just go across it once or twice. Don't rub on it, because you'll actually wear the finish off. That's really all it needs to prepare for the clear. Okay, and I'm gonna use the lacquer. Is that? Oh no, I don't want lacquer. I'm gonna use the paint thinner or mineral spirits to kind of give you a representation of what this guitar will look like. Once it's finished. In other words, the mineral spirits, it'll be deceptively beautiful for about 5 minutes, and then it'll dry back down. And right here, you want to stay away from this front, or you'll roll over the edge. It's kind of hell doing this type stuff on camera. And I'm just going to be real gentle with it, because if I'm not careful, I'll even lose the edge myself. So a little bit of swirl to knock off the orange peel, and then very quickly start moving into this straight line motion. Yeah, this one, I forgot, I did come back and I shoot some more black over this. But the cool thing about this black, this is actual Mohawk baleen. This used to be a product called Baleens, which is for musical instruments, and this is actual black super gloss. So with this paint that is on here, the black, you really wouldn't even have to. You wouldn't have to clear coat it if you didn't want to. But I do like to clear coat. So a little bit of swirl work. Get your paper clean. The nice thing about the aluminum oxide is it doesn't load up. If you feel little beads or little balls building up under it, then you're sanding way too soon. Lacquer is especially nice to work with, because it gets very powdery very quickly, and you can paint numerous coats in a day. If you're like I said earlier, if you've got a real dry, I don't know if that's in the camera, but I'm doing the heel a little bit. I'm being real careful to stay away from the edges. But if you're in a real nice dry climate, extremely low humidity, and if you've got a really good gun or you're spraying really thin coats, about 15 minutes to an hour apart, I've sprayed upwards of probably seven coats in one day, and that's pretty much pushing it. You better be spraying really thin coats if you're spraying that much. But tip, not with that guitar. I was terrified of taking that chance with that guitar. I sprayed no more than maybe 3 to 4 really nice thin coats each time, and then I would wait a day or two, and then go from there. But you can spray a few coats in a day. But if you're gonna try to finish a guitar and spray like 20 coats, don't spray 7 coats a day for 3 days in a row. You're probably going to end up with or blushing, because after about 10 to 15 coats, that stuff is still not 100% cured, and it might give you some problems. And the bad thing about painting with lacquer is once you start experiencing problems, uh, you got to really you got to be real. You got to really know what you're doing to get it under control, especially like if you get blushing. You're gonna have to wash it and let it dry, start over, and it can be a bit of a nightmare. All right, so you can see that's kind of still not perfect, but it's But the crazy cool thing about this right here, if this was your personal guitar, believe it or not, yeah, you could buff it a little bit, but just by beginning to play the guitar, it's eventually going to start glowing. It's going to start getting really shiny. So let's see what it looks like with a little bit of mineral spirits on there, and that's nowhere near a finished sand job, but that that time that I spent with it right there would be sufficient to start doing your clear coat bases with the clear nitro cellulose lacquer, and then and the cool thing also, the bad thing about the Explorer is it's got this huge wing on the top, and it's hard to hold, but with the mineral spirits, you can do a lot of like hand buffing. Like you can do a lot of wet buffing. I guess is where I'm going with this. And I have done this. This ends up being along the lines of doing like a French polish job, and you'd probably be shocked. I mean, it feels like glass right now, but you'd be shocked. You could just about take a paper towel, because they're kind of rough, porous anyway, and mineral spirits, and you could French polish buff this thing just with mineral spirits, and you'd be surprised how beautiful it'd be. It kind of have a vintage, old, old look to it. Trying to keep from scratching up that other guitar. All right, I'm spending a little bit too much time with this, but I just want to let you see how, if you're experiencing a little bit of orange peel and you're kind of freaking out, thinking, oh, you know what, I'm not, it's not going to be a pretty guitar. Well, just spend a little bit of time with it, and you'll be surprised how quickly it will come alive, and it'll help motivate you to keep working on the guitar. But also, this will keep you from panicking and going back in the spray booth and loading up more black, because it doesn't need any more color. Is where I'm going with this. The black, you achieve your colors very quickly. That was a bit of a a nightmare, because I was having to build that color up until it hit that threshold of, okay, this is going to be perfect for if he's playing outdoors. It's not going to be too light, But if he's indoors and as he passes under a light, or if it's laying over on the couch, you won't look at it and see a black guitar. It'll be a sapphire blue guitar. But if you get it under the lights, then it'll come alive a little bit. So the blue is always a difficult color to paint because you either end up too dark or too light. And that's probably why Fender, when they did their blues, they just kept them really, really light, like the Daphne or the powder blue or whatever it's called. And then, like what I'm holding here in my hands, um, just the black is you achieve the color very quickly. Okay, beautiful guitar. Not gonna spend any more time with this one on camera, but I just want to let you know how quickly within you know 10 15 minutes of just real gentle sandpaper work, and all that was done dry, and then a little bit of yeah, I mean, see, to me, that's a play. It's ready. This one's ready to play, even though it doesn't look all that attractive. uh, it's a player's guitar. You could rock and roll with that right there. It feels incredible. Okay, all right, so let me put this I'm gonna go ahead and pause, put this to the side, then we're gonna come back and talk about fretboards. Let me spend just about 30 seconds longer with the Nitro. If you're if you're just going to build one guitar, don't invest in any sort of spray equipment or any of that stuff. The chemicals that they've got out that you can just get in the aerosol can, you can achieve an incredible finish with it, first off. And it's the exact same product, although the solids might be different. And where I'm going with this is if you're painting a color or you're painting a clear, like a M113 1406. See, this is a 1406, but it's an M610 base, and this is an M113 base. What that really means, the short is the solids are much more dense. There's more solids out of the can or like a gallon than there is uh, in the aerosol. So when you spray the aerosol, you can actually do your final sanding much sooner, like within a week. Like if you've sprayed a guitar black and or a color and you've let it dry for a week or two, and then you come in and spray some clear coat. Uh, within they say that within 7 days you're able to do your finish sanding and buffing. That's a little bit too soon for these solids from out of the gallon or the quart, because these solids need a little bit more time to cure and shrink, because nitro shrinks quite a bit. And you'll get yourself in trouble if you start trying to do finished buff work if you've been spraying this clear coat, the M610, which it's obviously the same thing. It's classic instrument lacquer, but you'll get yourself in trouble if you're especially if you're using a machine buffer. You'll burn the finish. You'll melt it. In other words, so just wanted to let you know that if you're going to paint a guitar black, get the M104-0225. It's about $22 online. If you're spraying just a clear guitar that you're not tinting, then you can use this, or you could get these in tints as well, like a antique lacquer. I've got some over there, but I don't have time to get it. But you probably already know that if you wanted to spray like an amber finish, you can get this stuff in amber. But be careful. Uh, one coat of amber will look really beautiful. Two coats of amber, you'll get excited because you think you have this cool vintage thing going on. And then if you spray a third coat of a dark amber, it'll turn brown on you. You'll lose control very, very quickly. So if you're going to do aged relic look or just an aged finish, maybe just spray one, maybe two coats of a tinted color, and then immediately come back and just do all your finish work with clear. Okay. And there's so much more I could talk about related to painting and clear coat, but I'm just going to have to stop because that's not what this video is about. And I can't even really point you to any of my videos where I've gone into a 2 hour discussion from one series to the next, discussing in detail. The only thing I will say is If you're priming a guitar natural, do not prime it with a tinted nitro. Make certain that you do all these. You're priming. Let me grab a guitar. If you're building a custom guitar that you don't know exactly where you want it to end up, then do not dare tint your lacquer. Let the natural beauty of the wood come out first and just seal everything with just clear. And you might be thinking, oh God, it's just not that pretty though. It's kind of bland. It's this, that, and the other. Well, that don't worry about. Don't panic yet, because right now, if you string this guitar up and you start playing it, you might realize that, oh man, this neck is way too fat. I really need to take off a lot of area right here, or maybe a lot of area off the whole neck or something like that. Well, if you had have tinted that lacquer, now once you sand down to raw wood, but whatever you left was still tinted, now when you start trying to come in and do all your finish work, you've got a patch quilt. So with this guitar, um, or any guitar like this, if I start making modifications later on, it's no big deal, because I know that that's the natural color of the wood. Okay, that ought to make perfect sense. So don't fake it. Don't fake the color or the finish until you know that you've really got it sealed. Then make the determination of whether you want to come in and start clear coating. And you'll probably find, if you're working with a really choice wood, you might realize, wow, it's really beautiful, just natural. So let's just leave it clear and natural. Okay. So let me hang this back up. All right, where are we? 27 minutes. Yeah, I spent a lot more time talking about finish than I wanted to, but it's probably kind of overdue because I haven't done a video in almost 2 weeks related to this project. So let's talk about getting back in the saddle and what I've done over the last 2 weeks. It took me one night to do that first pearl, and then I think I did a video for the second one, and then I did not do a video to these because I did every bit of this by hand, except when I got down here. I did machine some of this out with different bits. I'm not going to talk about that in this video because I covered it in the last video. So every bit of this cutout is done by hand, and it's all epoxied in, and then I'd let it dry. So basically, I came in one night and did these two, epoxied them in, came back a day or two later, did one, I believe, one night, and then came back and did two like 4 or 5 days later. And then finally, over a week later, I did these three all at once in one night, and then let the epoxy dry for like 4 or 5 days before I started doing any machine work, because it was so critical that I had that mother of pearl perfectly flat and true, which I did, because once I started cutting my radius with my radius bit, my fretboard radius bit, I had to make certain that my mother of pearl was, perfectly true, so that I didn't machine off anything and get too thin. I already covered this. This little block right here, I use it as a sacrificial block. This is extremely old pine. It's from like the mid 1800s, and it's as straight as an arrow. It's very true. And then what I'll do before I start using it, because I do use it as a bit of a sacrificial jig, I will actually put a straight edge along this, and I'll take my router station and I'll route this surface perfectly true and flat and square. And then I know that if I'm doing something related to assessing something, I know that initially everything is true and very square. So if I see something going on, which I wouldn't, because I know that my jig is true, then I can trust my center lines. See, like I've made a center line mark on that board when it was still 2.5 inches wide all the way down, and then I sealed it with some clear nitro cellulose lacquer. That way I knew it would never get lost. Same thing down here. I made the center mark, Can you see it? Yeah, you can barely see it. Made the center line mark when everything was S4S. Then I sealed it with the Nitro lacquer. And then before I temporarily jet glued it to this jig with a CA glue, medium strength CA glue, I put 3 little dots down here. That mark right there indicates where I put 3 dots of glue on the back of the fretboard there, and then 3 dots of glue right there. So I have since, where's my putty knife? This is a insanely thin putty knife, and you've got to be really careful because you might as well be holding a razor blade. It's very sharp, but I've already broken the middle loose, and then it would just be a matter of so you're not prying, because if you start prying, you'll end up breaking at one of the joints. Pull a little bit, but if you don't hear it giving a little bit, and always be thinking about, okay, what's going to happen if I slip when I'm doing something? Where am I going to end up going? Am I going to end up cutting my arm? Because I cut the top of my thumb really, really bad when I first started building guitars. I was trusting the tool, and it slipped. All right, I'm gonna pause because I don't want to break this thing on camera. So, well, I'll tell you what. Let me do this real time, because I'm the idiot that started it. So let me see if I can finish it here. If you go straight down in the table, you know that once it breaks loose, it's just going to go down into the table. And even though that seemed kind of violent, it was a controlled break. Okay. And the cool thing about temporarily gluing it to this jig right here, if you have any tear out, it's going to tear out this softer wood. See how I've got my pencil line, the center right there, so that once I should have shown it before I took it off, but when I went over to my routing station, I started out really low and eased up, and I think I made something like maybe 55 passes with this, just total, about 25 to 30 passes each side. And as I made a cut here, then I would flip it over, make a cut there, raise the bit about 1/8 of an inch, run that pass, flip it over, run that pass until I got up to the finished job. And you always leave just a very small amount of material left in the middle, because if you tried to go ahead and take the blade all the way to the center, you run the risk of the bearing traveling along a lower point, and then you would end up cutting a irrecoverable line down the middle, and it'd be a nightmare to get that under control. Okay. All right, let me pause and get organized and think about how I should continue talking about this thing. But this is the first time I've seen it. It's really beautiful. But anyway, let me pause and get a drink of water, and then we'll go from there. Okay, let's dive back in. I have no idea what I was talking about, because I've been paused for like 20 minutes thinking about how to pull this video off in 20 minutes, but still provide some decent information. Okay, the order of operations after you did the rough machine work, and it's shaped, but it's fairly rough. Once you're in your jig, you're still in your jig, glued to the jig, then you're going to have like a Stuart McDonald or some sort of radiusing block to match the radius on your bit. And you might think, well, I'll just start sanding straight up and down. But I'm going to only talk about this briefly. A lot of times what I'll do, because it's on this jig, I can now clamp this, somehow or another. And I have a tendency to go across the roll a little bit, then move up and overlap and go up a little bit. and then go up here. And I'm talking about maybe with 220, just for a moment or two, very quickly go to up to 400, and then by the time once you hit your 400, then you can start doing a little bit of longitudinal sanding. And I'm just going to stop talking about that because everything about that is feel. But you can monitor it by keeping pencil lit, keep all the wood marked with a pencil, and then hit it once or twice to see if you have any low spots. If you have an exceptional jig and an exceptional router station, then you're going to be pretty darn close to the finish line. If not, just be prepared to work what you have to. And one of the first things I do as soon as I do all that rough work is verify that that center line is staying straight. And then I make my determinations from there. This one was tricky because this material was a little bit too thick, and that's okay. But I did have to machine off almost a full millimeter, which that might as well be half of an inch. It was an enormous amount of machine work that a thickness that I had to take off and maintain the new thickness. I was obviously all the way down the center line, and the way I did that was with a surfacing bit in my router station, and my router top has a real small opening. I mean, extremely small. This bit will just barely protrude through. And it was just, well, it was sticking up only enough to plane off in one pass. I don't mean like one pass this way. Once I made one pass, once I made one pass like that across it, I was through because I no longer had any mass right there to sit atop the table and keep me stabilized. And this is not something where you're wanting to hold your hand atop it and keep it level. That's an idiot move. You've got to stay away from this as you're making that first pass, from a safety standpoint, and then that material's gone. And then you move forward about an inch, and then you make that second pass. And then what's happening is it's making these little notched cuts as you're going all the way down the fretboard, and you just continue to work down the fretboard. And if you've got a really good routing station and you know what you're doing, that's the quickest and the easiest way to take off material off the back. If you start trying to sand it or fight it, it ain't gonna work. You're gonna lose the thickness. The variation is going to be so inconsistent. It's going to be a nightmare. It might look good, but it'll be a poor job. So then after I had finished that and leveled that, then I put it back up on here and re-glued it, and then I did my final sand work. Okay, so just read between the lines there. I did have to thin this one up. I was scared to go ahead and initially machine this piece thinner and then do all of this mother of pearl because I really had no idea how well the mother of pearl was going to turn out. And I was afraid that I might have to take some of the thickness off of the top to get it under control. But I did an exceptional job in my initial pearl work, and I didn't have to take any material off the top. I had to take that material off the back. But the approach I took was better safe than sorry. But then once I realized all the pearl work was beautiful, it's like, oh crap, I'm gonna have to break this off and surface it from the back and thinner out, which I did. And then the next thing was after I just broke it off that table or off that jig, came in with my multi-million-dollar rasp. This thing is worth a fortune. I bought this about 25 years ago, and I have a whole set. I have the triangle, the round, and the flat. And this has been an excellent tool. But you got to get that glue off and get her leveled down. And then also, I'm glad I thought about this. If you're not doing a binding, you have got to protect this bottom edge religiously because that's the finished guitar. And if you screwed up and you sanded the material off right there and you sanded a little divot in there, well, it's going to show, especially it being on the player side. But we're doing binding on this guitar, so the next step was, and before I forget, it's so important that you have some sort of means by which you verify the depth of all of your, just you got to have the depth proper, and know exactly how you're going to be installing these frets. I will be epoxy gluing these frets in, so and then it will have binding, which will will not allow for any epoxy or glue to squeeze out. So I got to be really good at the amount of epoxy that I put in there once I'm installing my frets. Otherwise, I'll create like it'll create a vacuum or a compression, and you can't get the frets to seat. So if you do glue work on this and you don't know what you're doing, I would recommend using really thin CA glue. But I do always glue in my frets, and they are either CA glued in, um, real very thin CA glue after the frets are in, or either I do a little bit of epoxy. I use a needle, and I rub the epoxy down on either side, or both sides of the fret slot wall, and therefore it just gives it improves the tone by about 40%, and it assures you that you don't have to worry about this stuff anymore because the machine work is so unbelievably precise. We don't have to worry about frets springing or popping loose, but using a fret slot saw. That's a difficult one to say. If you have a really good fret slot saw, and that's going to be 0.023 or 23 thousandths is the fret slot for your adjust guard frets. So I say all that to say this is pre-slotted the proper width where it's going to be a perfect fit, and I'm not going to have any risk of it. If these were too tight, this fretboard is going to start bowing down, or if they're too loose, they're going to come out unless you glue them in. And you don't want them to be too loose. You want them to be the exact proper width. These are gold. I'll be using nickel. But I'm just rambling off the top of my head here and letting you know that you got to make certain that you got those depths, the appropriate depth. Okay. In other words, where I'm going with this is a pretty detailed job. Once you move into the binding arena of binding, you got to really know what you're doing, because it's fairly easy to just do this job. Like, say for instance, this was the nag, and you're gluing it on, and then let's say that's the finished job right there, and then you just hammer the frets in, and the frets are hanging over, and then you come in with your fret nippers, flush cutters, and you nip them cut, and then you just bevel the edges, roll it if you want. That's a real easy job to do. And I thought that's the job we were going to be doing on this guitar, but then the client came back and asked me, he's like, hey, are we going to do binding on that? And I realized it was like, oh, crap, I didn't think about that. And I didn't realize that all of the Jackson fretboards have binding. And I was looking at this thing like a vintage Explorer, which does not have binding. So I ended up, eating that one. But it made me, at least I know how to do it and how to pull it off. But anyway, just always make certain that you know what you're doing, or communicate with your client and let them know, hey, if you want to do binding, that's gonna cost a lot more, or it's gonna cost a little bit more, or I'll work with you or something like that. Or it might be that the client just says, oh no, that's not that big of a deal. Just leave it natural. But you got to figure that stuff out on the front end, because if you're doing binding, well, then you have got to cut out this taper based on deducting the width, not the full width of the binding, but about 60% of the width of the binding off either side has to be deducted off of this taper. So once I made these true machine cuts with the router, with the jig that I used to route it, there was it was a point of no return. In other words, I'm going to clean this off in a little while, and we're going to fit it to here and see what it looks like, because I've never even seen it. But once you make that cut, you're going to be doing binding, because you've got to make up for the widths that you lost. There's an enormous amount of engineering that you've got to do as well. And let me just throw a curveball. Let's say you were going to do a 1 3/4 inch finished nut. This one's not. It's a little bit under that. It's 1 11/16 plus maybe a hair or two. Um, but if you were 1 3/4 and you were going with 60 thousandths binding on either side, that equates to 1/8 of an inch. Let me check the time. I'm getting way too deep into this video, but you would have to deduct 1/8 of an inch on both sides. So I'm sorry, 1/16 of an inch on the top, 1/16 of an inch on the bottom. But if you cut off a full 1/16 of an inch, you are not going to have enough thickness in order to shape round into and flow into your neck lower. So you only cut off about, like I said, 60% of that 60 thousandths. So if you measured this, you're thinking, well, what the hell is this going to fit? It's not going to fit anything. Well, it's going to fit this guitar custom, because once it receives the binding will be shaped to fit the top and the bottom, and it's a jazz guitar is what it boils down to. That's how you build a jazz guitar. Okay, so that's what we got going on here. It is a lot more work to do it this way, but it will be beautiful because it will look like the intended design, which is the Jackson design, and it'll be nice. So let's clean off the table here briefly and get the and do some initial fit work here. I showed that enough. You guys got to see it before you guys are getting to see it before I'm seeing it, because I'm trying to marry it up to the line. This is pretty important. See, I've got that pencil line right there from very early in the beginning of the build. So I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, that is exactly where this fretboard is going to go. That is very cool. See how you got the space on the top, space on the bottom? I'm not perfectly centered top to bottom, but once it receives the binding, then that binding will get shaped and rolled into everything, and it'll be a custom guitar. This thing's going to be really cool. Let's see if I can get a really good shot of it just kind of floating. Do a flyby. It's beautiful. I like it. Okay, so there you have it. Let me see if I've got it right where I need it. That ought to make perfect sense about dealing with the binding. Binding is truly, I would say it's an art form. It's not. It's extremely, it'll really ruin your day if you don't know what you're doing. Oh, I'm glad I thought of that. And I'll briefly cover this. To do your binding, you're going to want a little tin, and you're going to want to have a little bit of acetone in there. And this is about $30 something. By the time you get it shipped, I think it's $32 to $34. So it's expensive as all get out, but it's the only thing I ever use and can use. It's incredible. It's from Stuart McDonald, and it's called Guitar Binding Glue. And the way I'm not going to have time to talk about it, other than you've got the binding glue. You have to keep it vertical and keep all the glue pressed up in here. Otherwise, it'll dry on you if it gets too much air in there. And then always keep it stored vertical. Dip your little custom brush that you made in your acetone, and then your binding glue's out. You're set up to do however you're going to do the binding. And then you're going to brush a little bit of acetone in here. And then what I usually do is squirt the glue on a little bit of tape, and then I'll dip this brush into that glue and brush that glue on there. Or either if I'm doing a real long straight run, I'll just run the glue like an 8-inch area, and then I'll have the binding and I'll just actually push the binding up there by hand. I'll do this binding in about 30 minutes because I know exactly how to do it and what to do, and it's all just done by hand. It's not done on the guitar. This binding will be done uh, on atop a flat surface, and I'll just be holding it like that for a few minutes and letting it dry. And then you really wouldn't have to tape it, but if you're doing multi layers of binding like black, white, black, white, black, and then a thicker outside, you better tape that because the little micro binding will swell and it'll look really ugly. And when I say taped, this thing needs to be mummified. You'll have tape back to back. It'll be completely covered up with tape where you'll be taping from the top to the back all the way around. All right. Binding is fun. Just watch the Stuart McDonald videos. It's fun if you know what you're doing or you've got a really good game plan. Otherwise, you'll lose your job immediately, and you'll learn the importance of planning your work, working your plan. Let me check the time again because I know this video is about to end. I'm running out of battery storage time. I think I've got like 2 more minutes, so put it where it needs to be and show it one more time. See the little space on either side. The space will be about right there, but then the thickness of the binding will make up and round over. And what does it feel like? It feels like a multi-$1,000 guitar. It feels incredible. Feels incredible. And just everything about it. It's going to be an insanely fast neck. I'm glad we went with a thinner profile. And it's just under 7/8 of an inch thick at the first fret. And I believe it's just under 1 inch thick at the 11th fret. And then it's traditional Gibson nut width here and traditional Gibson width down here, which is actually kind of wide. It's 2 1/4. Well, that's not where it is. It's going to go about right there. Okay, so it's a cool guitar. Appreciate you guys dropping in. I'm sure I missed a lot of stuff, but I just don't have time to try to cover the whole damn guitar build because there's just a ton of information. And even when I was preparing for this video, checking the time again, I was even thinking, like, how in the, you know what, am I even going to cover, all the stuff I need to cover? But I kind of think I covered it enough from a 10,000 foot view that you guys see it coming together. Again, don't get discouraged as you're building the guitar. They're usually pretty ugly all the way through the whole build until you get to a point like that. And it's really cool to, see them come alive. And then it also motivates you to like get in there and finish your guitar as well. So very cool project. So again, appreciate you guys dropping in. And I'm looking at the table here. Don't have time to talk about frets. I don't think we missed anything because I talked about binding enough to let you know that it is going to be a bound fretboard. So we'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks.